Welcome to my podcast series. This is PT. It's good to have you here again today. I'll be sharing with you on the day I resigned from RCCG. This podcast, as you know, is just me sharing my stories with you, how I have journeyed the path of challenges, the path of struggles to get to where I am today. Is not to slander anybody or to bring anybody down or to expose anybody. No, the purpose is to motivate, to inspire, and to teach principles that guarantees success. So, like you have seen, I'm not going to mention any name, but I'm just going to share uh, my own challenges. So, if you check my other videos, you notice I spoke about how I got to Ado Ekiti in 2006, 2007 to start my life afresh as a young man, living alone on my own thereabout. But then several events took place in Ado Ekiti, especially in 2009. That particular video, I've done it, but I've not released it out yet, but it will come out soon. Yeah, so I had some challenges in Ekiti State, and then I had to return back. I had to return to Lagos for like 5 months. Then you will see that video. But then when I was coming back to Ado Ekiti, while I was in Lagos, God said, "The assignment I sent you to do in Ado Ekiti, you have not done it." So I decided to move back to Ado Ekiti. You know, Going back to Ado Ekiti was challenging for me because I didn't have anything anymore. I mean, by the time you listen to that story, you will understand what I'm trying to say. So anyway, I got back to Ado Ekiti, started looking for a place to start a church because God's instruction was I should go and find a place to start a church. While I was looking for a location and then trying to find a place to start a church and all of that, I've got all the equipment I needed. Everything was stocked in my room: keyboard, microphone, speakers, drum set. I had some little money, offering basket. All of them were stocked in my room, but I've got no location yet. While I was looking up to that and finding different places, going from one place to another, I've not been able to fix an exact place where I was going to use for a church. You know, I I realized that there was a new pastor that was brought in town as a pastor in charge of province. Then they used to call it provincial pastor. So I decided to have a word with him, visited him in his office. We met and we had quite a lot of long discussion. To cut the long story short, um, we met again. Don't forget that before that time, or let me say before that time, I was already seeking employment to work as a full-time pastor in RCCG. I was invited for an interview. That was in that same 2009 before I left Lagos back to Ekiti. I went for the interview. I passed the exam. And then when it was time for the oral interview, that was where they asked for my age. I told the person that was handling the interview my age, and they said I was too young to go into full-time pastoring, that I should go back to school. I said I was doing part-time in Ado Ekiti, University of Ado Ekiti, that I could start ministry work. He just sent me packing. So I had no choice than to return back to Ado Ekiti to go and find a way to start a church, since being a full-time wasn't working. So when I met this pastor, I told him about the story of how I wrote an examination to become a national staff in RCCG and how I was denied and all of that. So he asked me, do I still want to work? I said, yes, I'm ready. I'm available to work. There's a deep story there, but I will still tell you that one to share my thoughts on and encourage somebody on that, how I got the job. So let's put that aside. But then after we had the conversation, he said, okay, don't worry, I'll find a way. So he at the end of the day employed me as a provincial staff at the time. And then I started working with him. Of course, he told me that since I wanted to be a pastor, but he wanted me to be his personal assistant, which was fantastic. It was a big thing for me at that time. Imagine somebody who was coming out of a major a major challenge that led me out of Ado Ekiti. I closed down my office, my small office in Ado Ekiti, carried a few of my things back to Lagos, and God saying, after spending 5 months in Lagos, things were rough for me in Lagos. I mean, I had to come back to Ekiti to start all over because the process of what I was doing was already shut down. I needed to start all over. So now, having to be employed to work as a personal assistant to the, in quotes, the biggest pastor in the RCCG in Ekiti at that time was a big deal for me. In fact, the plan of the church that I wanted to start had almost left my mind. The equipment was back in my room. Even though I told him about it, he just said to me that I should just hold on for now, that he will sort things out. Now I'm going to start a church. That took like 6 to 7 months after, when Daddy gave an instruction that uh, all provinces should begin to plant. He gave them a target of 50 branches to start between June and August, and all of them should come with the reports. That was how he said, well, the church you told me about, do you still have plan for it? He said, I have plan for it. All the equipment are back in my room. And he said, go and start. So that's how I got the location, and then I started church. I started the church then. This was more than 12 years ago now, if not 13 years ago. So I mean, that being said, I started working with him. Things were very beautiful. I remember the first day I resumed at work, we both went to the office of the governor of the state. It was an amazing experience for me. I can't forget the impact of my work with the pastor. I mean, I must commend his efforts. I must commend his tenacity. I loved working with him. I really enjoyed my time working with him for those few time. I mean, I think it was about 3 years, thereabout, between 2009 to 2012. I was enjoying my time. We were going to different places. I remember I was writing a book on Daddy Gio, and that was taking him to meet some big pastors in Nigeria, Bishop David Oyedepo. I mean, that was how I had those encounters. Bishop David Oyedepo, we met with Olumide Manuel, we met with Bishop Wale Oke, we met with is it Reverend Achonwa, Achudime. No, not Achudime. There's this pastor in Lagos, one of the senior babas. Then we also met with the pastor of Trem, forgot his name now. Okonko, Bishop Mike Okonko. We met Bishop Mike Okonko. I mean, my relationship with him made me to meet a lot of big pastors in Nigeria. I mean, some of them on a one-on-one basis, some of them in hotel rooms. I mean, it was an amazing time. I cannot forget that experience. I mean, working with him was what got me in contact with Dr. Olumide Emmanuel. And then I enjoyed my time. I must say the truth. It exposed me during those period. It exposed me, expanded my horizon. I began to think differently, and then I began to have relationship with a lot of pastors in the church, especially in that province. I became, some people who had known me before who now know me now as the PA of the Oga. I became a big boy in town. He was sending me here and there. I remember a time the governor came in, I was always going to represent him. Sometimes he will have ministrations, he will ask me to go. I really enjoyed my relationship with him. But then there was this a cross came at a point. There was a challenge. I saw that there was a conflict between my work as his personal assistant and my ministry, that is pastoring a church. So I was pastoring a church. The church was a growing church, started with 20 people, was still trying to grow, but I wasn't available because we were always traveling, sometimes unscheduled plans, when I wasn't even aware that we were going to travel. So there were conflicts. Conflict was arising. Sometimes I would plan events, I'll plan programs, and I will in church invite special guests, special ministers to come and preach, and I will not be available for those events. Remember planning 3 days program, 7 days program. We have announced everybody is expecting their pastor to minister, and I won't be available for those programs. And I mean, it became sort of a challenge for me. The church was lagging. Yeah, the church was growing, but there was this conflict. There was this conflict, and it was so challenging for me to actually manage. And then, of course, I shared with my boss, but um several things came in. I don't want to go into deep details. Several things modeled up together, which we couldn't just find a balance. uh, my ministry was suffering, so I had as at that time, before I started working with him, if you followed some of my videos, I already wrote my first, second, I was working on my third book at the time. So people were already inviting me to speak at conferences, at seminars, to speak in churches. So I was already getting invitations. So by the time I started working with him, those my work with the pastor didn't allow me to be able to navigate to those ministrations. So I get invitations, I get to disappoint them because maybe the day I'm supposed to go for that ministration is the day I'm supposed to follow my boss to somewhere in Lagos or to an event that is not planned. So I really couldn't blame him, but that was the case. So I was struggling within me. I saw that I wasn't getting fulfilled anymore. Things were getting tough. I wasn't able to. So yes, I wasn't married, young man. So I had no plan for myself anymore. So I saw that I had to sacrifice those times to work with him. But there was a conflict between that and my personal vision. And so I didn't know. Maybe because I was quite still young. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I would have done it differently now. I'm not so sure. But I had to come to a point of making a decision to resign. It was a tough decision for me, but I had to come to that decision. How did I come about it? I used to do prayer work. So I started a prayer walk. I started praying for God to direct me, to lead me. I prayed. I used to live along Ilawe Road in Adwikiti. I would do a walk from that point where I was living, that junction, from my house to that junction. Then I would walk to Ilawe, do a prayer walk, and then I will do a walk back. Sometimes it could take me 2 or 3, 4 hours to do that. But I was praying. The prayer pattern is, Lord, give me direction. Give me direction. What should I do? How should I do this? How should I go about this? So, and I felt at a point that God would have me to resign. Tough decision, but I had to make it. So how am I going to cope financially? Because I was on a salary of 37,500. How am I going to cope financially with that resignation? So I did a calculation of what I was earning at the time, divided it by the number of days I was working. Apparently, that type of work takes virtually all my days in the week, Monday to Sunday, really. So sometimes we'll be in Lagos for 4 days, 5 days. So I divided 37,500 by 500 by the days, by 31 days in the month, and the result it gave me. I sat down and I asked myself, Tunji, um, can you make this amount on a daily basis? And I checked the few things I was doing. As at that time, I've not started my printing and publishing company. I was only doing designs for people, maybe earning peanuts, maybe 500 naira. Some people will give me 400 naira for design at the time. So my friend was into printing. I gave him the printing work to do. So, but when I came to that decision to resign, I had to tell myself the only thing that can sustain me is to start a business. Really, you know. By the time I was tendering my resignation letter, I was hoping, because I actually applied to work as a full-time pastor with RCCG. That was my plan. That is my plan. That's my aim. That is in 2009. But by the time he was giving me the employment, he employed me both as a his PA, and of course as a staff. But at the point of my resignation, I resigned as his PA, hoping or thinking that, of course, he will allow me to continue to work as a pastor, as a full-time pastor, and then just leave me at that. But unfortunately, it wasn't like that. He said, since I was resigning, that I won't be paid anymore. I'm going to be out of that service. Now, it was painful for me. It was very painful. I felt so hot about it. I mean, uh, and I made it clear. I made it known to him that, sir, I'm not happy about this. He said, uh, so I asked him, so what should I do? I mean, can I still continue to pastor my church? Because of course he said, no, you didn't resign as a pastor. So I saw a conflict in that. I'm not resigning as a pastor, but I'm being relieved of my salary, even though, in fact, when I was tendering my resignation letter, I had to attach my application letter, the letter I wrote initially to apply for the job, because he asked me to apply. So I had to put my application letter, which didn't state that I was applying for a personal assistant, because it was at the point of employing me that the addition of becoming a PA was added to my work. So I felt so hot and so bitter by that experience and by that situation, But then I can't force him. I can't. I mean, and I can't tell anybody about it. I just have to take it as my fate, as part of my journey. So he said to me, he said, Tunji, you can continue to pastor your church, but you won't be on the payroll. Well, I told myself it wasn't a bad idea since I'm still pastoring that church. So I moved on. So I resigned, tendered my letter, and it was approved. I can't forget March 31st of 2012. That was how I resigned from being a staff of the RCCG. A shocking and challenging experience. Um, Even though I had dreamed about it of being a full-time pastor, that has been what I knew that God has in plan for me. So it was painful having to resign and having to have that experience. But then I had to move on. So the day I did that resignation, I walked out of the office, asked him to pray for me. He did. And I can still remember the words of the prayer, but I won't tell you. So I moved on, and then I slept, woke up to a new day, asking God what will be the next move. I had a car to myself. I had an apartment that I rented from somebody. I had a church that I was pastoring. It was a growing church. As at that time, our attendance was already going to about 200. So I had a place to fall back. Things were tough. I mean, really, really tough, both financially, emotionally, and physically. Things were tough. It got to a point that I had to begin to borrow money to live, to even eat was very tough. Yeah, I had a car, but to even fuel the car to go to church was difficult. There were days I couldn't go to church. There were days I had to borrow money. Thank God for my treasurer in church that time. They used to provide little money for me. Sometimes they would borrow me. I will have to return it before we do remittances. It was tough, but we didn't steal. So, but many times when it's time for remittance, the money will not be available because they had borrowed faster. I don't know if this is going to put me into trouble, but you can check my record. I didn't miss any remittances anyway. It was tough. Life was tough. I was pastoring students. Some of them knew the situation. They pitied me. Some of them, thank God for my church members. They will give me things. They will buy food stuff for me. Some people will buy clothing, different type of clothing, palm slippers, and a lot of things. Of course, the part of that remittance means at some point we have to look for money, borrow it, and then put it back with the treasurer. They will do all the necessary things and then submit our remittances, and that's all. But then that was the challenge. I mean, I have to be truthful about it. It was tough, but at a point I made a decision I was going to start my business. So I said I was going to start a printing and publishing business. That was what led me to starting my printing and publishing business that is thriving today. Between 2012 and now, I will have published book for more than 300 or 400 authors. I mean, that was the journey that led me into that business, and I can never forget. I was out of employment for like the 8 months from March till December. It was sometimes around September, I met another pastor in the RCCG who heard of my story. He said he was going to speak to my former boss and see if they can resolve. And of course, it was resolved, and he was ready to employ me. And that was how I got employed back as a provincial staff in RCCG, January 2013. So I was only out of employment as an RCCG staff for like 9 months, thereabout. Yeah, roughly about 9 or 8 months, thereabout. And then in January 2013, I got another employment with RCCG, and I became a provincial staff somewhere in Akure. And the rest, they say, is history. Maybe 2 years from there, while in Akure, I got the national employment, um, as I became a national staff of the RCCG. And of course, I am still a staff since that time, and I give God all the glory. What was the take home here? Life will come with its own challenges. Yeah, different things will come, but key point is you must always uh, get an instruction from God. When challenges comes your way, you must be willing to go to God in prayers, ask Him for direction, let Him give you direction. He said He is going to direct your path. You ask Him specific, and when you are praying, you have to be specific. I prayed, Lord, what should I do? When you are talking to God, you ask Him as if you are talking to somebody beside you. You are open and be clear with Him, and He will give you direction. I felt strongly in my spirit that God wanted to restructure my journey, and He saw what I was going through, and He wanted me to find the right path, and that was how I journeyed that path. I give God the glory today. Still in contact with my boss. I mean, we became very close even after that time, because when issues like this happen, it's not for you um, to think bad or to relegate that relationship. You have to continue to build relationship. Things happen, but relationship is very important. So there may be issues, but you must keep your relationship intact. Why? Because you may need that relationship in the future. So it is said that when you want to close a door, you want to shut a door, don't slam the door. You know why? Because you may need to open that door again. I'll see you in my next video. Thank you for taking our time to listen. I share more stories. There's a story that led to this. I'm going to release that video soonest. I'll see you again.